Hello, I'm Dennis, and I welcome you in my tutorials. In the previous video we have made a simple landscape, textured it, and filled with the grass. In this tutorial I'm going to concentrate on placing trees and objects. We will be using the graph we've already created in the previous videos. If you have missed that, or forgot to save the final result, you can find the path to the graph in the video description. The scene can also be the same, or it can be the new one, it doesn't matter. If we are using the new scene, we've got to drag and drop the graph here to create a MapMagic object. And then drag and drop the character controller, in case we'd like to run the play mode and walk around. Here we've got the textured height map filled with the grass. Previously, we've used the map nodes. All of them are displayed with the blue color. Now it's time to add some objects. As their name says, these nodes perform operations on objects. Think of objects like a list of positions, rotations, and scales. Actually, they are special hashes, but it doesn't matter. The main thing is that objects just store the transition or coordinate, not a game object, transform, or 3D model. The next step we are going to take is to detail the created terrain with trees and plant a forest. The first node we will start with is scatter. Objects, initial, scatter. This generator will just fill the terrain with the random positions. If we open the preview and apply it to the terrain, we'll see where those objects are scattered. The density value determines the quantity of objects per square kilometer, the default tile size. It doesn't guarantee that this number of objects will be spawned in this tile. There could be a bit more or less objects, since they are spawned at random, but on the global scale, the object's density goes to this value. To output the scattered positions to the terrain, we've got to use the output. Objects, outputs. It could be either objects output or trees output. Since we are going to plant the forest, we will be using the trees one. Then we will link it to the scatter node and assign the prefab we are going to use as a tree. It will be the pine from the demo scene. Here you can see all of the terrain is filled with pines. These pines decorate the landscape a bit, but the problem is that the forests don't grow this way. You can see that some of the pine trees are growing on the cliff. Well, they can grow here in nature, but in this case it's better to remove them here. To do this, we will be using the grass mask and the grass portal we created in the previous video. Now we need a node that will read the grass mask and remove those objects that are in mask. So mask is what it is called. This way all of the trees on the cliffs areas are removed. This node will be one of the most used object nodes in our graph. Now we've got some trees growing here and there, but the thing is that the trees are usually growing in groups. So we are going to replace each of the individual trees with a bunch. The spread node is one that can help us with that. Here you can see that some of the trees are now duplicating. The distance value determines the range object spread. And growth, the number of those objects. Let me set it to exceedingly high value just to show the way it works. Here you can see the circles of trees. These trees were placed around the original center position. Retain originals will preserve it and add to the spreaded objects. Here you can see it in the center. Distance values determine the minimum and maximum spread range. In any of the tree groups, the trees count is no less than 10 and no more than 20. However, we've got a problem now. Some of the trees are still growing on the cliffs. This happens because the spreaded trees have moved from the center and now they are placed on the cliff areas. We should have used the spread node before the mask to remove the new trees from the masked area. Let's fix it now. I'm unlinking the spread node with the right-click menu, moving it before the mask, and linking it again. You can see everything works as expected. You may have noticed that all of the trees look the same. It would be handy if we could have a quick way to insert different prefabs instead of one and use them at random. Like tall trees, small trees, wide trees, and so on. There is a way to do that. In the Properties tab we can check the Multi-Prefab toggle. And now the prefab slots replaced with the layers. Here you can see the Layers tab appeared. Fortunately, we are already familiar with it. Pressing the Add button will create more prefab slots. Each will be used at random. Let me add all of the pine trees from the demo folder. There's one more thing to mention about trees. We're using the billboard trees, usually called imposters. In a distance, they're replaced with a billboard, just a plane with a tree texture. These trees are drawing very fast, but Unity got some limitations for them. Although the trees could be rotated, rotation doesn't work for billboard trees, and the same for the scale. It's a pity, since the rotation is the powerful way to visually diversify the tree types. Okay, so the pine trees are looking fabulous in the mountains, but in the lowlands I'd like to replace them with the deciduous trees, like birches. First of all, I've got to define what the lowlands are. Most likely, they should be the areas below some certain height level. So if I say height, then we will use the height portal for sure. Then there should be the node that would mask anything below, say, 100 meters high. This node is called Selector, and since it works with maps, it is the blue map node. I will turn the preview to see the result producing. Here it lit the mountain tops with green. For now, it masks everything that starts from 0.5 up to 1 in map values. But we've got to use the range from 0 to 100 and measure this range in world units. So we switch units to world, set from to 0 and 2 to 100. But 100 is too much, I guess. 50 should be enough. Transition is the range, where the selector map will be literally blended from 0 to 1. By the way, since we have created a bunch of tree nodes, I guess it's worth grouping them. Name the group trees and color it with green. Now we've got to remove pines from this area and fill it with birches. To remove, we will be using the mask node we are already familiar with. This will remove trees everywhere except the green areas. This would be fine for the birches, by the way. Checking inward will clean everywhere but the green areas. We will create the new trees output and assign the birch tree here. We'll use a single prefab for the test purpose. And now we will use the mask scheme we've seen for the pine trees, the one with no invert turned on. Here we have created the birch forests in the lowland, while the pine trees are still growing in the mountains. Let me turn the preview off. Now let's diversify the birch forest. We will be using the same method we used for the pine trees. We switch the trees output to the multi-prefab mode and assign the additional prefabs here. Note we can tune and adjust the pines and birches bias by changing the selector value. If we raise it, we get more birches. If we lower it, we get more pines. Although I'm pretty happy with the pine trees, the birch forests are too dense. It would be cool if we could make some more clearings in the woods. The easiest way to do this is to mask the birch forest with some random mask. Random masks usually come from the noise node. And I'm going to make the noise more contrast from the start, so I add the contrast node and turn on the mask previewing. Then I make it more contrast. Here I change the noise seed to avoid matching with our height map that uses the same noise. Then I guess the pattern is too big, so I lower the noise size. And then I lower the detail to straighten out the spot's edges. I mask the birch trees with the mask we've created. This seems to look fine. Now I've got to start the play mode to make sure it's really so. A rather pretty place to start. Let me climb out the mountain to see what's on the other side. Now, here are the birch forests again, so I can stop running. Well, I'm pretty happy with the forests we've got. The only thing it lacks is the ground detailing. We've got to add some stones and bushes. First of all, I will disable the trees outputs to concentrate on creating stones. As with the trees nodes, I will start with the scatter. Then I will create an output, but this time it will be the objects output. Can't find any stones, so I will increase their count. Now you can see that the size of the stones is too small. I've got to increase it. And I will be using the Objects Adjust modifier to do that. Here I can raise the scale value so that the stones are not tiny anymore. But more than that, I'd like them to have a random scale. So I switch on the random range and set the minimum and maximum scales as well. Moreover, I will make them rotated randomly from 0 to 360 degrees. And will lower their height a bit. It's too strange to see such stones on the top of the mountain or on the slopes. What I want to do is to make them slide down and fall into the valleys. I will be using the slide generator to do that. Slide generator uses the height to determine the sliding direction. And since the height is mentioned, we've got to create and link the height portal. Readjusting the iterations count, we can make the stones travel up and down the mountains. Looks funny. Okay, but still, single stones look unnatural. Let's add spread on them and create smaller stones around. But this time, let's take a look at the size factor. With the size factor set to 1, all of the growth and scale values will be multiplied with the stone size. And since we've got the stone scale ranged from 5 to 8, the growth is now 10 to 16 as well as the distance. And since we've got absolutely identical stones in each group, I will diversify them with the Adjust node again. I switch it to random mode and set the scale. And then force them to rotate again. And then adjust height. Then some adjustments in the spread node. Note that some of the stones are overlapping with the others. This could be fixed with the Verify node. This node will clean the objects that got distance between them lesser than the distance value, and it got the scale factor value we are already familiar with. The size of each stone is 1 meter, so the radius is half of a meter. It's quite handy to use 1 meter size for greatly scaled objects, since in this case we get the object size equal to the scale value. It would be cool if we could add some bushes around each of the stones. And saying around means that we've got to use the spread node again. And as output, I will be using the small birch tree, since I haven't made the bush model yet. Here we set the size factor to 1 and the distance to 0.5, which is actually the stone model radius. We will get the trees growing perfectly around the stone. However, I will reduce the quantity a bit. While creating the trees, you might notice that most of them are placed under the land surface level. This happens because we have adjusted this object's height, moving all of the objects down a bit in the Adjust node. Trees output can disregard this object level, and turning off the object height will place trees on the ground level only. Disabling relative height instead will place them on the object level, and disabling both on scene 0 level. Now I'd like you to take a look here. Here you can see the huge tree billboards on the horizon. This happens because the Unity billboard trees work this way. The main model isn't scaled, while the billboard changed the size. I don't know if it is a bug or it was made intentionally, but anyways, we've got the scale of our objects from 5 to 8, and so their billboards are scaled. This could be fixed by simply disabling the scale in the output. So, I'm pretty happy with the stone clusters, so I'm going to enable trees to find out how it looks as a whole. Yes, stones add some detail to the bare terrain. But also they bring some bugs. Here you can see the tree growing through the stone. We've got to remove the tree here, or vice versa to remove the stone. Actually, we can make it both ways, but for the stones we've already got the Rarefy node that will be used for that. The Rarefy node has the additional layers, and we can provide the additional position lists to remove the stones. Here, let's remove them on the pine tree positions, and here on the birch locations. You can see that it works, and the stones are no longer intersecting with the trees. But I'm just going to make it all a bit more tidy. I'm going to use the unified objects list for the trees, and to do this I'll use the combine node. Combine node gathers all of the provided inputs in one. It produces the single objects list with all of the input object merged. And then I'm going to use the objects portal. It is created the same way as the maps portal, except it's stored in the objects category. Here I create an enter portal, link it to the combined output, and for the Rarefy node I will be using only one additional input, and assign the exit portal here. Then we will group all of the stone nodes. Name the group, and set the color. This one looks like the stones themselves. Now I'm excited to see what we got from the player's perspective. I will walk the same way I walked before. But now I will rewind it so we don't have to wait. As for me, there are too many stones in the lowland, while too few stones in the mountains. So I guess I shouldn't allow stones to travel too far from the slopes, and thus decrease the slide iterations count. The most remarkable part is that if we want to edit something from the older nodes, we can do it at any moment. It's funny to see the stones traveling up and down the slopes, but now they are doing it in groups, disappearing when they get a tree in their way. Still, I guess it's better to increase the stones count, let's say 3 times. Here we'll run through the mountain forest. Here are the stones on the slopes. Look very natural in here. All of the forest looks way better when it has some details here and there. Stones are just a start. We can then add fallen trees, shrubs, maybe some artificial objects. Not in scope of this tutorial, however. For now, I'm pretty happy with what we finally got. If you are a MapMagic 1 user, you might find nothing new in these two videos, but with the next tutorial we will make it a bit more populated, add houses and villages, and then we will make a step to the terra incognita, the spline nodes, and we'll bring even more life into this land. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye.